I'm Ryan. I'm 32 years old, and at what was supposed to be a happy family Christmas dinner, I watched my entire family implode because of money I earned. Before I tell you about the fraud, the lawyers, and the moment I finally cut them out of my life for good, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's good to know I'm not alone in this. The air in my parents' Denver home was thick with the scent of roasted turkey and pine needles, but it was suffocating. It always was. Every holiday felt less like a celebration and more like a performance, a stage meticulously set for my younger brother, Leo, to shine. I wasn't even a supporting actor. I was part of the scenery, meant to be silent and unremarkable. Leo, looking sharp in a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my first car, was holding court at the head of the dinner table. A glass of expensive red wine, a gift he'd brought, swirled elegantly in his hand. He was painting a grand vision of his new real estate venture, Davis Properties, using big words like synergy and market disruption. "It's a sure thing," he announced, his voice booming with a confidence he hadn't earned but had been given his entire life. "We're projecting seven-figure profits in the first fiscal year alone. The sky's the limit." My mother, Eleanor, gazed at him, her face a mask of pure adoration. It was a look I'd seen 1,000 times, but never directed at me. "Oh, that's my boy," she cooed, reaching over to pat his arm as if he'd just cured a disease. "Always thinking big. He has such a solid plan." She then turned her head, and her gaze fell on me. The warmth in her eyes instantly vanished, replaced by a familiar, icy evaluation. Her smile thinned into a perfectly straight line. "And Ryan," she said, her tone dripping with a sweet, poisonous condescension that was her specialty. "How's your little computer thing going? Are you still just messing around with all that code in your dark little room?" The table fell silent. Every relative, every cousin, every family friend who had been nodding along to Leo's speech now turned to look at me. This was her signature move, the public diminishment. For years, I had perfected the art of deflecting, of mumbling something vague and changing the subject. But not this year. A decade of silent work, of sacrifice, of being made to feel small, had built up a pressure inside me that was about to blow. I placed my fork down on my plate, slowly, deliberately. The small metallic sound seemed to echo in the sudden quiet. I met her gaze and held it, refusing to be the first to look away. "It's going well, Mom," I said, my voice dangerously calm and even. "The little computer thing is a software company. My software company, and it was just valued by a top VC firm at $28 million. Silence. Absolute, deafening silence. You could have heard a snowflake land on the carpet. Leo's smug smile froze, then completely shattered. His face cycled through a Rolodex of emotions. Confusion, disbelief, and finally, a deep, blotchy, ugly red. "What?" he sputtered, his wine glass hitting the table with a thud that sloshed red onto the white tablecloth. "You? 28 million? That's a lie." He tried to laugh, but it came out as a short, strangled bark. "You're a liar. You've never done anything important in your entire life." "Leo, honey, calm down," my mother said, but her eyes were wide, darting between me and Leo, the gears turning in her head. "No!" he shouted, shoving his chair back so violently it screeched against the hardwood floor. He stood up, his whole body trembling with a rage that was terrifyingly childish. "He's making it up to make me look bad. He's always been jealous of me. Ryan, stop this ridiculous nonsense this instant." My mother screeched, her voice rising to a shrill pitch as she rushed to Leo's side. "You're upsetting your brother. And my father, Richard?" He just sat there, motionless. His face was a blank, unreadable mask, his eyes fixed on his plate as if the pattern on the china held the answers to the universe. He didn't say a word. He didn't even flinch. The room erupted into chaos, shouting and accusations flying across the once festive table. But in that moment, as I watched the family I had spent a lifetime trying to please completely fall apart, I felt a strange, cold calm wash over me. This wasn't the end of the story. This was just the explosion that exposed a rot that had been festering for years. To understand how we got here, you have to go back. You have to see the two completely different worlds my brother and I grew up in, under the very same roof. Growing up in our house was an early lesson in inequality. Felt like living in a split-screen movie. On one side, you had Leo's life, playing out in vibrant, saturated color with a triumphant orchestral score. On the other side, you had mine, filmed in grainy black and white with nothing but the sound of crickets. We had the same parents, the same address, but we were citizens of two different countries, one of which was a beloved homeland, and the other a barren colony. Leo was the golden child. It wasn't a secret. It was the constitution of our family. He was charming, athletic, and had my mother's looks, a fact she pointed out at every opportunity. He was incapable of doing wrong. If he broke a window playing baseball in the backyard, my dad would laugh and say, "That's my boy. What an arm." If I accidentally left a book on the coffee table, my mother would sigh dramatically and say, "Ryan, why do I always have to clean up after you? Your brother never leaves a mess." The differences weren't just in discipline. They were woven into the financial fabric of our family. Take our 16th birthdays. On the morning of Leo's, I was woken up by a car horn. I looked out my window and saw a brand new, fire engine red Mustang in the driveway. A giant, ridiculous bow was stuck to the hood. My parents flanked the car, beaming, as Leo ran outside, screaming with joy. He hadn't worked a day in his life. He hadn't saved a dime. The car was just bestowed upon him, a divine right of the favored son. My 16th birthday, 2 years prior, had been a quieter affair. My dad handed me a card with a crisp $20 bill inside. "Happy birthday, son," he'd said. "Responsibility is the greatest gift a man can have." I spent that entire summer flipping greasy burgers at a local diner, the smell of fried onions clinging to my clothes. I saved every single dollar until I had enough to buy a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door and a persistent smell of wet dog. When I proudly parked it in the driveway for the first time, my mother glanced out the kitchen window and remarked, "Well, I hope it's reliable. We can't be driving all over town to pick you up when it breaks down." There was no praise for my hard work, only a warning about the inconvenience I might cause them. It wasn't just cars. It was everything. Vacations were planned around Leo's sports schedules. Family dinners were dominated by his stories. I remember one evening, I was ecstatic because my science fair project had won first place in the district. It was a complex little robot I had built and programmed myself. I brought the blue ribbon home, my chest puffed with pride. I tried to show my father, explaining how the code worked. He glanced at it for a second, gave a non-committal grunt, and then turned his attention back to the TV. "That's nice, son. Hey, Eleanor, did you see Leo scored the winning goal today?" My first place ribbon was quickly forgotten, relegated to a drawer in my room, while a blurry photo of Leo kicking a soccer ball was framed and placed on the mantel. The ultimate disparity, the one that truly set the course for our lives, was education. Leo was an aggressively average student. He got by on charm, not intellect. Yet, my parents insisted he attend the most prestigious private high school in the city. The tuition was a constant source of stress. I'd overhear them having hushed, anxious conversations in the kitchen about dipping into their savings, about putting off repairs on the house. But for Leo, no expense was too great. It was an investment in his future. Meanwhile, I was a straight-A student. I loved to learn, devouring books on math and science. But when it came time for me to start high school, a private education was never even mentioned. It wasn't a possibility. The public school down the street was deemed perfectly fine for my needs. The message was clear. Leo's future was worth a financial struggle. Mine was not. He was a long-term investment. I was a fixed expense to be minimized. My mother's favorite phrase, the one she deployed with surgical precision to cut me down to size, was always, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" It was a rhetorical question, of course. It was a statement of fact. You are not enough. She'd say it when Leo made the varsity soccer team and I was at home, taking apart an old radio to see how it worked. Leo is out there being part of a team, getting fresh air. Why are you always cooped up in your room with all this junk? The circuit boards and wires I found fascinating were just junk to her. She'd say it when Leo was out at parties, surrounded by friends, and I was in the library, teaching myself new programming languages. Your brother has such an active social life. It's important to be popular, Ryan. No one likes a loner. My quiet focus was a social failing in her eyes. But it wasn't just my mother's words that shaped me. It was my father's silence. His silence was an entity in itself, a heavy blanket that smothered any hope of fairness. He was there physically, but emotionally he was a ghost in his own home. He saw the blatant favoritism. He saw me paying for my own car insurance with my part-time job money while they were funding Leo's expensive ski trips. He saw my mother praise Leo for simply existing while she criticized every choice I made. And he did nothing. I tried on a few occasions to connect with him, to break through that wall of silence. I remember one Saturday afternoon, I found him in the garage, working on his old workbench. I had just finished a complex coding project for a school competition, a simple video game I had designed from scratch. I was so proud of it. "Hey, Dad," I said, holding my laptop. "Can I show you something?" He was sanding a piece of wood, his movements slow and methodical. He didn't look up. "I'm busy, Ryan. It'll just take a second," I pleaded. "I built this game. See, you can control the character with the arrow keys." I held the laptop out, showing him the little pixelated figure moving across the screen. He stopped sanding for a moment, glanced at the screen for no more than 2 seconds, and then went right back to his work. He grunted. "That's nice. That was it. That's nice." The same tone he used when commenting on the weather. My creation, the thing I had poured weeks of my life into, was dismissed with the same emotional investment as a passing cloud. My shoulders slumped. I closed the laptop and walked away, the familiar sting of disappointment in my chest. He never asked about it again. He didn't ask if I won the competition. He didn't care. His inaction was a form of agreement. It told me that he, too, believed I was second best. His refusal to intervene wasn't peacekeeping. It was an endorsement of the status quo. He was a silent partner in my mother's campaign of emotional neglect. That silence became the defining sound of my childhood, a constant, humming reminder of my place in the family hierarchy, firmly at the bottom. It taught me a valuable lesson. Sometimes the people who say nothing are the most complicit of all. And it was a lesson that would come back to haunt me in the most devastating way possible. When it came time for college, the family's deeply ingrained double standard became a formal financial policy. Leo, who had coasted through his expensive private high school with a C average, got into a decent private university 2 states away. My parents were ecstatic. They threw him a huge going-away party, inviting all their friends to celebrate the launch of their golden child into the world. They bought him a whole new wardrobe, a top-of-the-line laptop, and set him up with a generous monthly allowance that was more than what I earned in a month of full-time work. His success was their success, a reflection of their good parenting. For me, the conversation about college was very different. It took place in the kitchen, under the harsh fluorescent lights. My mother laid out some papers on the table. "Now, Ryan," she began, in a tone that suggested she was being incredibly reasonable. "We've helped as much as we can with Leo's tuition. Our savings are tight." My father just stood by the counter, sipping his coffee, a silent bystander to my fate. It was made clear that the bulk of the financial burden for my education was on me. There was no discussion of the college fund they had supposedly started for both of us when we were kids. It had been entirely consumed by Leo. So I did what I had always done. I figured it out myself. I earned a partial academic scholarship to the State University in Denver. It had a fantastic computer science program, but in my mother's eyes, it was a public school. A local school. It lacked the brand name prestige she craved for her sons, or at least for one of them. Those college years were a relentless grind. My days were a carefully orchestrated chaos of lectures, late-night study sessions, and long shifts at a coffee shop near campus where I was a barista. The smell of burnt coffee and steamed milk was the scent of my survival. I lived in a tiny, cramped apartment with two other guys. Our living room a maze of second-hand furniture and stacks of textbooks. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. It was the first time in my life I felt a real sense of control, of independence from the suffocating judgment of my family. It was also where I met Chloe. She was in the pre-law program, a whirlwind of energy, intelligence, and fierce loyalty. We met in a brutal calculus class that we both needed for our degrees. While I understood the numbers, she understood the people. She was the first person who saw my quietness not as a flaw, but as a sign of focus. She saw the ambition I kept carefully hidden. We became inseparable, fueling each other's dreams over cheap coffee and stale donuts in the 24-hour student lounge. I'd sketch out algorithms on napkins, my hands moving excitedly as I explained a new software idea, and she'd listen, really listen, asking sharp questions that pushed me to think bigger. "You're going to build something incredible one day, Ryan," she told me one night, her voice full of a conviction I had never heard from anyone else. "Don't you ever let those people," she never called them my family, "make you feel small for it." She became my family, my real family, the one I chose. She was the person I called when a freelance coding gig fell through, the one who brought me food when I was too broke and too busy to cook. She was my cheerleader and my confidant, the keeper of the dreams I was too scared to say out loud to anyone else. Her belief in me was a lifeline, a stark contrast to the dismissive validation I no longer sought from the people who were supposed to give it freely. The email from my mother inviting me to Christmas dinner felt less like an invitation and more like a summons. "Everyone will be here," she wrote. "It's important for the family to be together." The subtext, as always, was that my attendance was required to maintain the illusion of a happy, normal family. Every instinct I had screamed at me to say no, to invent a prior commitment, to feign illness. But a small, stubborn part of me, a part one thought I had buried long ago, felt a familiar pull. The foolish hope that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. Walking through the front door of my parents' house was like stepping into a time warp. The same photos lined the hallway wall, a curated museum of Leo's achievements. Leo holding a soccer trophy, Leo in his graduation cap, Leo grinning on a boat. Tucked away in a small frame behind a lamp was a single, awkward school photo of me from the 5th grade. My hair askew and a forced smile on my face. Felt less like a memory and more like an afterthought. The atmosphere was already thick with forced cheer and the low hum of family gossip. My Aunt Carol, my mother's sister and a woman who could turn any conversation into an interrogation, descended on me before I could even take off my coat. "Ryan, there you are," she exclaimed, her voice a little too loud. She gave me an air kiss that smelled of hairspray and judgment. "We were just hearing all about Leo's incredible new business. He's such a go-getter, that one. What have you been up to? Still tinkering with those computers?" Her eyes did a quick, dismissive scan of my simple outfit. I managed to mumble a non-answer and escape to the living room, where Leo was, predictably, the main event. He stood by the fireplace, a tablet in his hand, swiping through architectural renderings for his audience of captivated relatives. "And this, right here, is the rooftop infinity pool with a panoramic view of the mountains," he announced, his voice oozing salesmanship. "Davis Properties isn't just building condos. We're selling a lifestyle, an exclusive lifestyle." I grabbed a beer and tried to find a quiet corner, but my mother, ever the stage director, orchestrated the seating at the dinner table with military precision. She placed me directly across from Leo, ensuring we were the two opposing focal points of the evening. The dinner began, and for a while it was bearable. The conversation was a bland mix of weather, sports, and my cousin Jessica complaining about her boss. Then, my mother cleared her throat, tapping her water glass with a fork. It was time for the evening's main performance, the Ode to Leo. "I just want to say," she began, her voice quivering with what she probably thought was genuine emotion, "how incredibly proud your father and I are of our son, Leo." She paused for dramatic effect, beaming at him. "He's taking this brilliant idea and building a real empire from the ground up. He's a true visionary, a natural leader." A smattering of applause went around the table. Leo preened, giving a modest little dip of his head as if he were a king accepting tribute from his subjects. I focused on meticulously cutting a piece of turkey, counting the seconds until this was over. But it wasn't over. This was just the setup. She turned her gaze to me, her smile tightening into a weapon. Leo was just telling us he's in the final stages of securing his primary investors. It's all very high-stakes, high-finance stuff. She paused, letting the words hang in the air before delivering the final blow. It must sound like a completely foreign language to you, Ryan, with your little computer business. It was the perfect, calculated insult. In one sentence, she had painted him as a titan of industry and me as a child playing with toys in a sandbox. The silence that followed was heavy, expectant. They were all waiting for me to wither under her gaze. But they had miscalculated. The person they were looking at wasn't a child anymore. I let the silence stretch for a beat longer, feeling the weight of 15 pairs of eyes on me. I could feel their collective expectation. They wanted me to shrink, to look down at my plate, to offer a self-deprecating mumble that would validate their perception of me. Instead, I took a slow sip of water, setting the glass down with a quiet click. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't show a flicker of the anger that was coiling in my gut. I decided to meet her attack not with defense, but with an overwhelming show of force, delivered in the calmest voice I could muster. Actually, Mom, I understand high finance pretty well, I said, my voice cutting cleanly through the silence. My company just closed its Series B funding round. We were valued by one of the top venture capital firms in Silicon Valley at $28 million. The words dropped onto the table like stones into a silent pond. The ripples of shock were visible on every face. First, blank confusion. Then, wide-eyed disbelief. My Aunt Carol's perfectly lipsticked mouth fell open. My cousin Jessica's snide smirk evaporated as if it had been wiped clean. Leo was the first to recover, his defense mechanism kicking in. He let out a harsh, ugly laugh that sounded more like a cough. 28 million? You? Ryan, you've got to be kidding me. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. No, I said, my gaze unwavering. I'm not. That's a lie, he snapped, his voice rising, cracking with a sudden, raw fury. His carefully constructed image of the successful son was being threatened, and he was panicking. You live in a crappy 2-bedroom apartment, and you drive a 5-year-old sedan. Where's your 28 million, Ryan? Huh? Did you leave it in your other pants? It's called reinvesting in the business, Leo, I replied, my patience finally starting to fray. It's tied up in company assets and shareholder equity. It's not a pile of cash you use to buy a new watch every time you feel insecure. The word insecure was the trigger. He exploded. He slammed his fist on the table with such force that the silverware jumped and my aunt's wine glass tipped over, spilling a dark red stain across the white tablecloth like a wound. He's lying, he screamed, his face turning a deep, alarming shade of purple. He's just saying this to ruin my big night. He's trying to make my announcement about Davis Properties seem small and pathetic. My mother, seeing her golden child in distress, immediately sprang into action. Ryan, that is enough, she commanded, her voice sharp as a shard of glass. You apologize to your brother this instant. How dare you come into this house on Christmas and tell such ridiculous, hurtful lies to get attention? Lies. The word echoed in the cavern of my mind. My entire adult life, my work, my sleepless nights, my years of sacrifice. All of it dismissed as a lie. It wasn't just that they didn't believe me. It was that they were incapable of believing me. In the tightly scripted narrative of our family, I was not cast in the role of the successful one. My success was a logical impossibility to them. It's the truth, I said, my voice hardening into something they had never heard from me before. And I am not going to apologize for it. You see, Leo shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me from across the table. He's always been like this, a jealous, pathetic loser who can't stand to see me succeed. He was completely unhinged, the charming facade stripped away to reveal the spoiled, entitled child underneath. And my father, Richard. Throughout this entire thermonuclear exchange, he remained a statue carved from indifference. He stared at his half-eaten slice of turkey, his hands resting placidly in his lap. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Leo. He didn't look at his hysterical wife. He had simply vacated the premises of the present moment. His silence wasn't peace. It was a vacuum. A terrifying, damning vacuum of support where a father should have been. The dinner, for all intents and purposes, was over. It disintegrated into a flurry of awkward goodbyes as relatives, mortified and thrilled by the drama, scurried out the door. I left without another word, the sound of my mother's shouting and Leo's whining following me out into the cold night air. The drive back to my quiet apartment was surreal. I thought I would feel some sense of vindication, of triumph. Instead, I just felt hollow, as if I had won a war no one else knew I was fighting, only to find myself alone on the battlefield. The next morning, the coordinated campaign began. It was a masterclass in manipulation. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. Your brother is deeply hurt. He has always looked up to you, and you embarrassed him in front of the whole family. You need to be the bigger person and fix this. I stared at the message, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Leo had never looked up to me. He had only ever looked down on me. I ignored the text. An hour later, another one arrived. Family is the most important thing, Ryan. Leo has a real opportunity to make something of himself. It is our job to support him. Then came the text from Leo himself. His tone was a bizarre cocktail of arrogance and entitlement, as if his tantrum had been a negotiating tactic. Hey bro, so I guess you've done all right for yourself. That's cool. Listen, this real estate project of mine is a guaranteed home run. We're family, so I'll do you a favor and let you in on the ground floor. A small investment from you, say $1 million or $2 million, would be a great way to show everyone you're sorry for being a jerk last night. He wasn't asking. He was demanding. He genuinely believed he was entitled to a cut of my success as a form of reparations for his bruised ego. The audacity was breathtaking. I didn't reply. That evening, as I was trying to lose myself in work, my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. The message she left was a carefully crafted guilt trip. Ryan, it's your mother. Her voice began, dripping with disappointment. I just don't understand you. You have all this money now. What is the point of having it if you don't use it to help your own family? It is your duty to support your brother. He just needs a little push to get his company off the ground. Don't be so selfish. The final assault came from my father. He called the next day. His voice, unlike my mother's, was soft and placating. It was the voice of a man who avoids conflict at all costs. Ryan's son, he began. Let's all just take a deep breath. Your mother is very upset. And Leo is, well, you know how he gets. He's passionate. Why don't you just hear him out? It's a solid business plan. Maybe you could invest just a little bit, to keep the peace. It would mean the world to your mother. Keep the peace. That was his life's mantra. Maintain the calm surface, even if the depths were teeming with sharks. His gentle attempt at mediation was just a different flavor of the same pressure. A quiet push toward the cliff's edge. That night, the attack went public. My cousin Jessica, ever the loyal foot soldier for Team Leo, posted a passive-aggressive screed on her Facebook page. It's so sad when people get a little bit of money and completely forget where they came from. They turn their back on the very family that raised them. Some people have no #loyalty. #family first. It was a coordinated, multi-front war designed for one purpose: to pry open my wallet. They didn't see me as a son or a brother. They saw me as a freshly discovered oil field, and they were all coming to stake their claim. Just as I was about to turn off my phone for the night, an email notification popped up. It was a promotional newsletter from a real estate company. The subject line made my blood run cold. Davis Properties, a new vision for Denver living, backed by tech visionary Ryan Davis. My heart hammered against my ribs. I opened it, and there, in the middle of a glossy, professionally designed email, was my name, my story, twisted and co-opted for their gain. He wasn't just pressuring me. He was already cashing my check. I picked up my phone, my fingers trembling slightly, and made the most important call of my life. Chloe? It's Ryan. I need a lawyer. Chloe's law firm was on the top floor of a downtown skyscraper, a world of glass and steel that felt a million miles away from the cluttered campus library where our friendship was forged. I forwarded her the Davis Properties email before I arrived, and when I walked in, she already had it projected onto a large monitor in her office. Her expression was a mixture of professional focus and personal fury. Backed by tech visionary Ryan Davis? She read aloud, her finger tapping the screen. That's not marketing language, Ryan. That's a statement of fact. A legally actionable statement of fact if it's untrue. Have you given him a single dollar, signed a single piece of paper? No, nothing. I haven't spoken to him since he sent that insane text message demanding money, I said, pacing back and forth in front of her floor-to-ceiling windows. Okay. She swiveled in her chair, her fingers a blur across her keyboard. Let's see what the public record says about Davis Properties, LLC. In seconds, the state's business registration records appeared on the screen. My stomach clenched as I read the details. The company was registered 3 months ago. The primary owner was listed as Leo Davis. And the co-founder, my breath hitched in my throat. The co-founder was Eleanor Davis. My mother. She's his business partner, I whispered, the words tasting like poison. I sank into one of the chairs opposite her desk. This isn't just her pressuring me to help her baby boy. She's in on it. Her own money is on the line. It gets so much worse, Ryan, Chloe said, her voice grim. She clicked a few more links, her legal research skills moving at lightning speed. She found a cached version of a password-protected investor portal that Leo's incompetent web developer had foolishly allowed Google to index. It took Chloe less than a minute to bypass the login. Inside was a treasure trove of deceit. Brochures, presentations, and detailed financial projections. And my name was plastered over everything. They had invented glowing quotes from me, praising Leo's unparalleled business acumen. They had listed me as a key member of their board of advisors. But the crown jewel of their fraud was a PDF file tucked in a folder labeled Executed Agreements. The file name was r.davis_commitment_letter.pdf. Chloe opened it. It was a formal letter, printed on a passable forgery of my company's letterhead. A logo they had clearly stolen from my website. The letter stated my firm intention to make a seed investment of $2 million into the project. And at the bottom there was a signature. My signature, or at least a clumsy but not entirely terrible forgery of it. This is wire fraud. Ryan? Chloe said, her voice sharp and clear, cutting through my shock. They are using your name and forged documents to solicit investments from accredited investors. This isn't a family squabble anymore. This is a federal crime. I stared at the forged signature. It was shaky in places, trying too hard to mimic the way I sign my name. But there was something hauntingly familiar about it. Something in the elegant loop of the R and the sharp, confident angle of the Y. It reminded me of my father's handwriting. The perfect, neat cursive he used on the handful of birthday cards he'd given me over the years. I pushed the thought away. No, impossible. He was passive, he was weak, but he wasn't a criminal. He wouldn't do that. Chloe was already on the phone, speaking in clipped, professional tones to a private investigator she kept on retainer. Frank, it's Chloe. I need a rush job. Full background and asset check on a Leo Davis and an Eleanor Davis and their shell company, Davis Properties. I want to know every potential investor they've contacted, every dollar they've raised, everything. And I need it yesterday. As I sat there, watching my friend, my chosen family, spring into action to protect me, another horrifying realization dawned on me. The company was registered 3 months ago. They had been planning this, using my name behind my back, long before that disastrous Christmas dinner. The dinner wasn't the start of their scheme. It was their desperate, final attempt to make their lie a reality after they had already committed the fraud. The next 48 hours were a relentless deluge of ugly truths, delivered in concise, brutal reports from Frank, the private investigator. The first revelation was about the source of my mother's investment. She hadn't just used her savings. She had cashed out a significant portion of her and my father's retirement portfolio, the very nest egg they had always claimed was so meager, and poured it directly into Leo's company. This wasn't just a mother's support. It was a desperate, all-in gamble. Her frantic pressure on me wasn't just about helping Leo. It was about saving herself from financial ruin. Frank's investigation also quickly identified their primary target, a man named Mr. Harrison, a semi-retired real estate mogul with a legendary reputation in Denver. He was old-school, cautious, and known for being notoriously difficult to impress. According to Frank's source inside Harrison's firm, the only reason he was even considering Leo's amateurish project was because of my supposed involvement. They were using my hard-earned reputation as the bait to land a whale. But the most gut-wrenching discovery was yet to come. Chloe called me late the next night. Her voice tight with a cold fury I had never heard from her before. "You need to come to my office, Ryan. Now, it's about your old business consultant, David." I drove through the deserted city streets, my mind racing. David? The man who had been my first real mentor? The one who had helped me refine my business plan and land my first angel investors? It didn't make sense. When I got to her office, she had a printout of an email exchange sitting in the middle of her large mahogany desk. It was between David's professional email account and Leo's personal one, dated 2 months before Christmas. Leo had written, "David, per our conversation, I need the inside track. What's Ryan's company really worth? Don't give me the public numbers. I need to know his personal equity, his liquidity, his expansion plans. I need the real story." David's reply was a complete and total betrayal, spelled out in black and white. He had sent Leo a detailed, confidential summary of my company's finances, our growth projections, and my personal equity stake. He had even offered his opinion on my psychological state. "He's hungry for approval, especially from family. If you frame it right, you can get him to invest." He had sold me out. The man I had trusted, the father figure I had projected onto him, had analyzed my weaknesses and sold them to my brother for what Frank later confirmed was a promised 10% commission on any investment Leo could secure using the information. How could he? I whispered, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. I remembered all the times I had confided in him, sharing my business fears and my family frustrations. He had listened with a sympathetic ear, all while taking notes to sell to the highest bidder. "Money makes people do ugly things, Ryan," Chloe said softly, her hand on my shoulder, "and family makes them do even uglier ones." As I stared at the emails, the image of that forged signature flashed in my mind again. The familiar loop of the R. The steady, confident hand. Chloe must have seen the dawning horror on my face. "What is it?" she asked, her voice gentle. "The signature," I said, my own voice barely a whisper. "The forgery on the investment letter. I need to see it again." She pulled the document back up on the big screen. I stared at it, my heart pounding a slow, heavy drumbeat in my chest. I thought about my father's perfect, neat cursive, a skill he was quietly proud of. I thought about his calligraphy hobby, the expensive pens and inks he kept locked in his desk, the way he could flawlessly replicate different fonts. His silence, his constant, unyielding silence. It wasn't weakness. It was the quiet composure of a man with a secret. "Chloe," I said, the realization landing with the force of a physical blow, a punch to the gut that knocked all the air out of my lungs. "I think my father forged my signature." There was no going back. This had to end, and it had to end in a way that left no room for ambiguity, no possibility for them to twist the narrative later. With Chloe's guidance, we planned the confrontation not as a messy family argument, but as a precise, surgical legal strike. There would be no shouting, no hysterics, just cold, undeniable facts. Chloe drafted and sent a formal email to my parents and Leo. It was a masterpiece of corporate legalese. It requested an urgent teleconference meeting to discuss a serious legal matter of potential wire fraud and fraudulent misrepresentation concerning Davis Properties. She strategically CC'd Mr. Harrison's executive assistant, noting that his client's potential multimillion-dollar investment was directly implicated. That, as she predicted, lit a fire under them. They agreed to a video conference for the following afternoon. I sat in Chloe's state-of-the-art conference room. The large screen in front of me split into 4 quadrants. In the top left, me and Chloe, sitting side by side at a long, polished table, a neat stack of documents in front of us. In the top right, my parents, Eleanor and Richard, sat stiffly on the familiar floral couch in their living room. Eleanor looked indignant, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Richard just looked pale and terrified, like a man on his way to his own execution. In the bottom left, Leo, sitting in a flashy, rented office space, a ridiculously large ficus plant behind him. He was trying to project an image of a powerful executive, but the panic in his eyes betrayed him. A moment later, the 4th window blinked to life. Mr. Harrison, a stern-looking man in his late 60s with piercing blue eyes and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He gave a curt nod. "Thank you all for joining," Chloe began, her voice the epitome of calm authority. "We are here to discuss the repeated and unauthorized use of my client, Ryan Davis's, name, likeness, and corporate branding in the marketing and fundraising materials for Davis Properties, LLC. Leo scoffed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Oh, come on. Is that what this is all about? Ryan, are you serious? I was just trying to give the business a little family credibility. It's called marketing." "Marketing, Mr. Davis?" Chloe countered, her gaze sharp enough to cut glass. "Let's be more specific. I have here a promotional email sent to over 200 potential investors, a list which includes Mr. Harrison. This email explicitly claims that Ryan is providing strategic backing to your company. Is that a true statement?" It's a turn of phrase," Eleanor interjected, unable to stay silent. "You lawyers are always twisting words. Ryan is his brother. Of course he supports him in spirit." "Support in spirit does not typically involve a forged legal document, Mrs. Davis," Chloe said, her voice dropping a degree colder. With a click of her mouse, she shared her screen. The fraudulent partnership commitment letter appeared in all 4 quadrants, filling the screen. This document, which purports to be from Ryan's company, pledges a $2 million investment. It is a complete fabrication. The letterhead was stolen from my client's website, and the signature is a forgery. Leo's face went chalk white. He started to stammer, his carefully constructed composure crumbling in real time. I don't know where that came from. That must have been a mistake. Someone on my marketing team must have, gotten ahead of themselves." Mr. Harrison, who had been watching this exchange with the silent intensity of a predator, finally spoke. His voice was a low, powerful rumble that seemed to vibrate through the speakers. "A mistake, son? That document was the primary basis upon which my firm engaged in due diligence with you. My consideration of this project was entirely contingent upon Ryan Davis's financial involvement. This is not a mistake. This is a material misrepresentation of fact." "It's not a misrepresentation, Mr. Harrison. It's fraud," I said, speaking for the first time. My voice was steady, betraying none of the turmoil churning inside me. I looked directly at my mother's image on the screen. And it wasn't just Leo. My mother, Eleanor Davis, as the co-founder and a primary financial backer of this company, was fully aware that they were illegally using my name to solicit funds. Eleanor gasped, placing a hand on her chest in a theatrical gesture of shock and betrayal. "How dare you? I was only ever trying to help my son. You are a cruel, selfish, ungrateful boy, Ryan." Her performance was for nothing. The evidence was right there on the screen. But I wasn't done. The real architect of the most damaging part of the fraud was still hiding in plain sight, wrapped in a cloak of silence. I turned my attention to my father. He was shrinking into the couch cushions, his eyes darting everywhere but at the camera. "There's one last piece to this puzzle," I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. "The forgery itself. It was a good attempt, Very convincing at first glance. But not quite good enough. The virtual air in the conference was thick with a toxic silence. Leo and my mother were still sputtering denials, but their arguments were hollow, collapsing under the weight of the evidence Chloe and I had laid out. Mr. Harrison watched them with the cold, detached curiosity of a scientist observing microbes in a petri dish. As I was saying, I continued, my voice calm and measured as I drew the focus back to me. The forgery is the key, because a forgery like this isn't a mistake. It's a deliberate act. It requires intent. It requires a steady hand. I paused, letting the silence stretch, forcing them to contemplate the implication. I looked directly at my father's image on the screen, pinning him with my gaze. And it requires a certain artistic skill, a deep familiarity with the signature being copied. On my cue, Chloe clicked her mouse again. The screen changed. She now displayed a side-by-side comparison that she had expertly prepared. On the left was a high-resolution scan of the forged signature from the fraudulent investment letter. On the right was an equally clear scan of the signature from a birthday card my father had given me when I turned 21. It was the last birthday he'd given me a card with more than just his name signed at the bottom. It read, "Ryan, so proud of the man you're becoming. Love, Dad." The two signatures were identical. Not just similar, identical. The distinctive, elegant loop of the R in Ryan. The sharp, downward stroke of the N. The way the D in Dad was formed with a flourish that was my father's unique trademark. It was as clear and damning as a fingerprint. A small, strangled sound escaped my mother's lips. "Oh my God!" she whispered, her face slack with a genuine, unfeigned shock. She slowly, mechanically, turned her head to look at the man sitting beside her, the man she had been married to for over 30 years. For the first time, she seemed to be seeing him not as her silent, passive husband, but as a stranger. Richard sat frozen for a long, agonizing moment. The blank mask he had worn his entire life finally cracked, then shattered. His face crumpled. His shoulders, which he always held so straight and proud, slumped in utter defeat. In an instant, he seemed to have aged 20 years. He looked old and small and profoundly pathetic. He started, his voice a hoarse, broken whisper that was barely audible. He cleared his throat. Leo came to me. His eyes flickered up, not to me, but to the camera, as if pleading with a panel of invisible judges. He said he just needed a little help to get Mr. Harrison on board, just to get his foot in the door. He said Ryan would never find out. His eyes finally darted to my window on the screen, and for the first time, they were filled with something other than indifference. They were filled with a desperate, pleading shame. He said you were doing so well, you had so much, you wouldn't even miss it. I didn't think you'd ever find out. His confession landed in the room with the force of a physical blow. It was, in so many ways, a betrayal far deeper than Leo's greedy scheming or my mother's narcissistic manipulation. This was a betrayal from the one person whose approval I had, on some secret subconscious level, always craved. His lifelong silence hadn't been neutrality. It had been the quiet, patient work of a co-conspirator. He hadn't just allowed the injustice in our family to happen. He had actively, skillfully participated in it when the stakes were high enough. He hadn't just failed to protect me. He had helped load the gun, aim it, and then stood by silently as his other son pulled the trigger. The final, devastating piece of the puzzle clicked into place. He hadn't just been guessing that I wouldn't miss the money. He hadn't believed my success was real. Even after I had told them all at Christmas, he was so conditioned to see me as the lesser son that he assumed my $28 million valuation was an exaggeration, a fluke. In his mind, I was still the boy with the nerdy hobby, and stealing from me was a victimless crime. Mr. Harrison's voice boomed through the speakers, shaking them all from their stupor. This meeting is over. Consider my firm's interest in Davis Properties officially and permanently withdrawn. My legal team will be in touch with all of you regarding the matter of fraudulent misrepresentation. His window went dark. Leo buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. My mother was staring at my father, her mouth opening and closing like a fish, but no sound was coming out. The family unit hadn't just been cracked. It had been atomized. And I was the one who had been forced to push the button. This is the moment that changed everything, when I finally took back control of my life. Thank you for sticking with me this far. You're amazing. Please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below, just so I know you made it here with me. It not only helps more people find this story, but it also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone else. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of this journey. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for them. Mr. Harrison was a man of his word. His lawyers sent a cease and desist letter so aggressive it practically smoked. While he didn't file a lawsuit, Chloe suspected he didn't want the publicity of being duped by a charm boy like Leo. He did something far more damaging. He made a few quiet phone calls. In the small, insular world of Denver real estate development, a quiet word from a man like Harrison carries more weight than a dozen lawsuits. Within a week, Leo was a pariah. The story of the Davis Properties fraud, as it became known, spread like wildfire through the city's financial circles. Every other potential investor, who had been cautiously waiting to see what Harrison would do, pulled out. Davis Properties imploded, a house of cards collapsing in a gust of wind. The bank, alerted to the fraudulent activity by Harrison's firm, froze Leo's corporate accounts pending a full investigation. The money my mother had gambled from their retirement fund was gone, entangled in a legal mess that would take years and thousands of dollars in legal fees to unravel. Her desperate, all-in bet on the golden child had resulted in total financial ruin. As predicted, Leo's girlfriend, Sophia, the one who was so impressed by his exclusive lifestyle, vanished from his life as quickly as his credit line. Then came the phone calls to me. They were a predictable, pathetic progression of grief and manipulation. Leo was first. He left a string of voicemails that swung wildly between two poles. The first would be a rage-filled rant. "You ruined my life. You did this to me. I hope you're happy. You jealous bastard." The next, just an hour later, would be a tearful, pleading message. "Ryan, please, you have to help me. You have to call Harrison and fix this. I'm begging you, bro. We're family." Then came my mother. Her first call was pure, undiluted venom. She screamed into the phone for 3 straight minutes about how I had destroyed the family, how I was a monster, how she wished she had never had me. I hung up. When I didn't respond to her subsequent calls, her tone shifted. She started leaving these syrupy, manipulative voicemails, her voice quivering with false sorrow. "Ryan, darling, it's your mother. I know we made a mistake. I see that now. But we're family. And families forgive each other. We can get through this together. Please just call me back. Your father is a complete mess." And then my father. He only left one message. It was short. His voice was heavy, hollow, defeated. "Ryan, I know I should have done more. I'm truly sorry." It was the closest he had ever come to taking responsibility for anything in his entire life. He was sorry. Sorry for a lifetime of neglect. Sorry for his complicity. Or just sorry that he got caught. It didn't matter. An apology doesn't rebuild a house after you've helped burn it to the ground. I listened to all their messages, one after the other, sitting in the quiet of my apartment. I didn't feel the rage I expected. I didn't feel the triumphant satisfaction I thought I might. I just felt a deep, profound sense of release, as if a heavy, invisible chain that had been wrapped around my chest for 30 years had finally been broken. The desperate, childish need for their approval had finally, blessedly, died. I took a deep breath and did something I should have done a decade ago. I opened my contacts list. I found Leo's name. I tapped block contact. I did the same for my mother. And then, with a final, liberating tap, I blocked my father's number. The next day, I met with Chloe to discuss the final step. We had them dead to rights. We could press federal charges for wire fraud and forgery. We could file a civil suit for damages to my reputation that would bankrupt them for the rest of their lives. A part of me, the wounded child inside, wanted to. It wanted to see them face real, public consequences. It wanted to see them in a courtroom, stripped of their pride and their lies. The lawsuit would almost certainly trigger a messy divorce, forcing them to turn on each other under legal pressure, a final, fitting end to their toxic partnership. But as I sat there in her office, a powerful clarity washed over me. Dragging them through the courts would keep me chained to them for months, maybe years. It would mean depositions, hearings, and endless legal maneuvering. It would mean more drama, more stress, more of my life force being consumed by their bottomless pit of dysfunction. The best revenge wasn't seeing them in a prison cell. It was forgetting they existed. My victory wasn't about their punishment. It was about my peace. We're not pressing charges, I told Chloe, my voice firm. We're not filing a suit. We're done. I'm walking away from all of it. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then, I heard her smile through the phone. Good, she said, her voice warm with approval. I was hoping you'd say that. Now you can finally start living your own life. For yourself. The 6 months that followed were the quietest, most peaceful months of my entire adult life. The first thing I did was put my Denver apartment on the market. The city held too many ghosts, too many memories of feeling small and insignificant. I needed a clean break, a new horizon. I found a brilliant young executive to run the Denver office and moved my company's headquarters, and myself, to Boulder. The energy in Boulder was a revelation. It was a city of innovators, of people who were more interested in what you were building than who your family was. Surrounded by the towering, steadfast presence of the Flatiron Mountains, my old family problems began to feel trivial, like a schoolyard squabble seen from a great distance. Freed from the constant, low-grade hum of anxiety my family had always generated in me, my mind felt clearer, sharper, more creative than ever before. The business didn't just grow. It exploded. We landed a massive, company-defining contract with a national tech conglomerate, a deal that tripled our valuation overnight. The promotion from a scrappy startup to a major player in the industry was dizzying, but in the best possible way. Felt earned. Felt real. Maria, one of my very first hires, became my COO, and together we cultivated a company culture that was the antithesis of the family I grew up in. It was a place built on merit, mutual respect, and a genuine desire to see each other succeed. It was a healthy, functional family, the kind I had always craved. I bought a modern condo in the heart of the city with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the mountains. The first piece of furniture I bought was a huge, comfortable sectional couch, big enough for all my friends. Chloe, who had officially become my corporate counsel and my best friend, would drive up from Denver, and we'd sit on my balcony for hours, drinking beer and talking about everything and nothing. I started hiking on the weekends, climbing high into the mountains, breathing in the clean, thin air until my lungs burned. I was building a life, not just a company. A life that was whole and balanced on my own terms. One afternoon, my assistant buzzed me. "There's a David on the line for you," she said, her voice hesitant. "He says it's a personal matter." I hadn't heard or thought of that name in months. A cold knot of my former life. "Put him on speaker," I said. "Ryan, my boy, it's David." His voice was an oily slick of false sincerity. "Listen, I heard about the big contract. Just incredible. I always knew you had it in you. I was thinking, now that you're in the big leagues, you're gonna need experienced people around you. Maybe you and I could grab lunch, talk about the next steps. I have some fantastic ideas for scaling." I let him talk for another 10 seconds before cutting him off. My voice was calm, cold, and final. "David, are you seriously calling me to ask for a job? After you sold my confidential financial information to my brother in an attempt to help him defraud me?" The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. I could almost hear the gears in his brain grinding to a halt. Well, that was a complete misunderstanding," he finally stammered. "No, it wasn't a misunderstanding," I said. "It was a betrayal. And now this conversation is over. Lose my number." I hung up the phone. Felt incredible. It was another closed door, another boundary definitively enforced. I was learning that the world was full of people like my family, and like David, takers, parasites who attach themselves to success and try to drain it for themselves. But I was also learning that the world was full of good, decent people like Chloe and Maria and my new team. People who valued integrity and loyalty above all else. My job, I realized, was simply to learn how to tell the difference and to choose my circle wisely. I was finally in control. I was happy. I truly thought the story was over. But there was one last, pathetic, desperate echo from the past still to come. News from my former life came in sporadic, secondhand trickles, usually through Chloe, who would hear gossip through the Denver legal community. Leo, buried under a mountain of debt from his failed venture and with his reputation completely incinerated, had declared bankruptcy. He was, according to rumor, living back with my parents in their new, much smaller home. A 30-year-old man sleeping in what was likely a spare bedroom, the golden child now a tarnished dependent. My parents had been forced to sell the large family house I grew up in to cover their catastrophic losses and mounting legal fees. They had downsized to a generic, soulless condo in a sprawling suburban development. The stage for their grand family performances had been foreclosed on. I tried not to think about them, but sometimes, in quiet moments, I would feel a brief, fleeting pang of something. It wasn't pity. It was more like a sad acknowledgement of the sheer waste of it all. They had had a family, a comfortable life, 2 healthy sons. And they had burned it all to the ground in a bonfire of their own making, fueled by greed, jealousy, and a staggering lack of character. I was too busy living my own life to dwell on theirs. My company was preparing to launch a major new software product, and the team was buzzing with the kind of creative energy that only comes when people are truly passionate about what they're doing. I was also starting to date someone. Her name was Sarah, a brilliant and funny landscape architect who knew nothing about my past and didn't care about my net worth. She just liked that I made her laugh and that I was willing to try her weird vegetarian recipes. Life was simple and it was good. Then, one sunny Tuesday afternoon, a certified letter arrived at my office. It was from a law firm in a small town outside of Denver that I'd never heard of. My first thought was that it was some follow-up from the Davis Properties mess. But my hands were steady as I slid a letter opener under the flap. My heart no longer leaped into my throat at the thought of my family. I was detached, clinical, like a doctor examining a case study. Inside was a letter, thick with dense legal jargon, informing me that a lawsuit had been filed against me. The plaintiff, Eleanor Davis, my own mother. I scanned the pages, my eyes skipping over the legalese until I found the core of her claim. It was so audacious, so breathtakingly delusional, that I actually laughed out loud. Eleanor was suing me for 20% of my company's profits. Her legal argument, as bizarre as it was this: her years of emotional neglect, her constant criticism, and her blatant favoritism towards my brother had created a hostile and challenging environment. This environment, the lawsuit claimed, was the primary motivating factor for my success. She argued that, in essence, she had given me the gift of adversity. Her terrible parenting, her lawyer argued, was the crucible that had forged my ambition and my drive to succeed. Therefore, she was entitled to a significant share of the rewards. She was demanding what her lawyer had the gall to call a parental inheritance, paid in reverse, for services rendered as a negative role model. It was the most narcissistic, pathologically twisted piece of logic I had ever encountered. She wasn't sorry. She hadn't learned a single thing. In her mind, even my success, the success I had achieved in spite of her, was somehow because of her. She would twist reality into any shape necessary to make herself the hero, or at least the catalyst of the story. This lawsuit was the final, definitive proof that my decision to cut them out of my life wasn't a rash, angry reaction. It was a necessary act of emotional and spiritual survival. Some people, I realized with chilling clarity, are black holes. They will suck all the light and energy out of your universe and give nothing but darkness in return. You can't fix them. You can't change them. You can only get as far away from them as you possibly can. I faxed a copy of the letter to Chloe. She called me back 10 minutes later, sputtering with laughter. "Oh my God, Ryan," she said, once she had caught her breath. This is a masterpiece. It's the Mona Lisa of frivolous lawsuits." "So, I don't have to worry?" I asked. "Worry?" She laughed again. "No. I'm going to have this thrown out of court so fast it will make your mother's head spin. Don't give it another thought. Chloe was as good as her word. The lawsuit was summarily dismissed by a judge who, according to Chloe, called it an astonishing abuse of the legal process and an insult to common sense. My mother was likely ordered to pay my legal fees for having to respond to such a baseless claim. It was the last I ever heard from any of them. The silence that followed was final, complete. It was no longer the tense, painful silence of my childhood, filled with unspoken resentments. It was a peaceful, open silence, full of promise. It's been a few years since that last, absurd chapter. My company is doing better than I ever could have imagined. Sarah and I are married now, and we're expecting our first child. But the real success of my life isn't measured in dollars or valuations or stock options. It's measured in the quiet, ordinary moments. It's measured in the easy laughter I share with my wife, the genuine respect I get from my colleagues, and the simple, profound joy of waking up in the morning without a knot of dread in my stomach. I learned a hard, painful lesson from the people who were supposed to teach me about love. I learned that sometimes the people who share your blood are the ones who are most willing to drain it. Family, I've discovered, isn't about biology. It's about loyalty. It's about the people who show up for you, consistently and without agenda. The people who celebrate your wins as if they were their own, who lift you up when you fall, and who see and love you for who you truly are, not for who they want you to be. It's about the family you build, not the one you were born into. Cutting my biological family out of my life was the hardest and most necessary decision I ever made. It hurt in a way that's hard to describe, like amputating a limb that has become gangrenous. The phantom pains still ache sometimes. But it was also like removing a poison that had been slowly killing me my entire life. It allowed me to finally heal, to finally breathe, to finally become the person I was always meant to be. My life isn't a fairy tale, but it's mine. It was bought with late nights, hard work, and the courage to walk away from a family that saw me as a commodity instead of a son. And I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect your own peace? I'd be honored if you shared some of your own story in the comments below. And please, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Take care of yourselves out there.